Have you ever wondered why the number 13 is considered unlucky? From high-rise buildings skipping the 13th floor to people avoiding 13 guests at a dinner table, the fear of the number 13 is deeply ingrained in many cultures around the world. But where did this fear originate? To understand, we must delve into the realm of triskaidekaphobia, the scientific term for the fear of the number 13. The origins of triskaidekaphobia are as mysterious as the fear itself. Some trace it back to ancient civilizations where numerology held a crucial role. In these societies, the number 12 was considered complete, representing the 12 months of the year, the 12 signs of the zodiac, or the 12 gods of Olympus. 13, being one step beyond this completeness, was seen as an aberration, a number of excess and potentially misfortune. In the Western world, the fear of 13 has been linked to Christian theology. The Last Supper is often cited as a key influence. Here, 13 individuals sat at a table, and one of them, Judas Iscariot, betrayed Jesus Christ. This narrative perpetuated the idea that having 13 people at a dining table was a bad omen. In other cultures, such as in China and Japan, the fear of 13 is less prevalent. Instead, numbers like 4 and 9, which sound like words for death and suffering in their languages, are considered unlucky. And yet, despite these cultural differences, the fear of 13 has become a global phenomenon. It's so widespread that it affects economies, architecture, and even personal decisions. People go out of their way to avoid this number, from skipping the 13th row on an airplane to refusing to close a deal on the 13th day of a month. This fear of the number 13 is so pervasive, it even has a scientific name, triskaidekaphobia. As we continue to explore this complex phobia, we'll uncover more about its historical roots, its cultural manifestations, and perhaps even its potential benefits. After all, fear is often just the other side of fascination. The number 13 has had a bad reputation since ancient times. It's as if this number was born under an unlucky star, finding itself in the most unfortunate of circumstances throughout history. Let's take a trip down memory lane and see how 13 has earned its notoriety. First, we find ourselves in biblical times. At the Last Supper, Jesus sat at the table with his 12 disciples, making the total count 13. We all know how that story ended, with betrayal and crucifixion. Not a great start for our number 13, wouldn't you agree? Fast forward to the Middle Ages, the number 13 strikes again. This time it's the Knights Templar, a medieval Catholic military order that became extraordinarily powerful and wealthy. However, their luck ran out on Friday the 13th of October, 1307. King Philip IV of France, probably not a fan of the number 13 himself, ordered the arrest and torture of the Templars. A dark day indeed, and yet another black mark in the history books against our unlucky number. And let's not forget the ill-fated Apollo 13 mission, the 7th manned mission in NASA's Apollo space program. It was supposed to be a triumphant journey to the moon, but instead, it turned into a desperate struggle for survival. An oxygen tank exploded, forcing the crew to abort their moon landing and make a dangerous journey back to Earth. All this happened on a spacecraft bearing the number 13. So, is it a mere coincidence that 13 keeps popping up in these unfortunate events? Or is there something more to this number that we're not seeing? One thing's for sure, history has not been kind to the number 13. It's been associated with betrayal, downfall, and disaster. Historically, it seems like the number 13 has been at the wrong place at the wrong time. But is this number truly cursed, or has it just been a victim of circumstance? Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the mysteries and secrets of the number 13. The number 13 isn't just unlucky in history, but also in mythology and religion. Let's dive into the realm of myths and legends, to Norse mythology, where the number 13 played a role in a cosmic disaster. The gods of Norse mythology were having a feast in Valhalla, their heavenly hall. 12 gods were invited, but Loki, the trickster god, gatecrashed the party, making the number of attendees 13. Loki brought chaos and destruction with him, causing the death of the beloved god, Balder. This unfortunate event associated the number 13 with misfortune and treachery. Now, let's leap forward to Christianity, where the Last Supper played a pivotal role in shaping perceptions around the number 13. The biblical narrative tells us that Jesus and his 12 disciples gathered for a meal, making the total count 13. Judas Iscariot, the disciple who would later betray Jesus, was the 13th to arrive. His actions led to Jesus' crucifixion, casting a dark shadow over the number 13, marking it as a harbinger of betrayal and tragedy. In both these instances, the number 13 is tied to chaotic and disastrous events. It's not just about a number anymore, it's about the narratives and stories that have been woven around it over centuries. The number 13 in these contexts is a symbol of disorder, disruption, and calamity. From the Norse gods' heavenly banquet to the Last Supper of Jesus, the number 13 has been a silent spectator to chaos and calamity. It's a number that's been etched into our collective consciousness as something to be wary of, a number that carries with it a sense of unease and foreboding. Whether it's the trickster Loki causing havoc in Valhalla or Judas Iscariot betraying Jesus, the number 13 is invariably present, watching from the shadows, a silent participant in these tales of turmoil. From the gods to the disciples, the number 13 seems to bring disorder and destruction. The number 13 and its reputation have not been lost in modern times. It continues to pervade our daily lives, subtly weaving itself into the fabric of our culture. Take a moment to consider architecture. Have you ever noticed that many buildings, particularly skyscrapers, mysteriously seem to lack a 13th floor? This isn't a construction oversight or a design flaw. It's a deliberate choice made to avoid the supposed curse of the number 13. Instead, you'll often find the elevator buttons jumping from 12 to 14, with the 13th floor hidden under the guise of a less ominous number. And it's not just in architecture where this superstition holds sway. The travel industry, too, dances around the number 13. Some airlines avoid the number 13 for their flight numbers, while others omit the 13th row on their aircraft. Even hotels often skip out on a room number 13, all in an attempt to keep superstitious travelers at ease. The impact of this number extends to the corporate world as well. Companies, in their branding and product launches, are careful to sidestep the number 13. Would you buy a smartphone model 13 or move into a house numbered 13? Many would hesitate, and businesses know this. They'd rather not risk their bottom line on a number that makes their customers uncomfortable. The entertainment industry isn't immune either. Filmmakers and writers often play up the sinister reputation of 13, using it to add a layer of suspense and mystery to their work. The result? A self-perpetuating cycle where the fear of the number 13 is constantly reinforced through popular culture. The number 13, then, is more than just a digit sandwiched between 12 and 14. It's a symbol, a cultural phenomenon that continues to influence decisions, big and small. Despite our technological advancements and scientific progress, the allure and apprehension around the number 13 persist. In the 21st century, the number 13 still makes people stop and think twice. But what makes us fear the number 13? To understand this, we delve into the realm of psychology. There are several theories that might explain why the number 13 sends shivers down the spine of many. One of the most common theories is confirmation bias. This is a type of cognitive bias that causes us to only pay attention to information that confirms our existing beliefs, while ignoring evidence that contradicts them. So, let's say you've heard the number 13 is unlucky. The next time something unfortunate happens on a day associated with the number 13, you're likely to remember it and associate it with the number. If something good happens, well, you might not pay as much attention. This bias can lead you to believe that 13 really is an unlucky number, even though there's no concrete evidence to support it. Another psychological theory is linked to superstitions. Superstitions are beliefs or practices that are irrational or not based on reality, often relating to luck, prophecy, or spiritual beings. The fear of the number 13, also known as triskaidekaphobia, is just one of many superstitions that exist around the world. Superstitions often arise from our desire to make sense of the world and exert control over our environment. In a world full of uncertainties, superstitions provide an illusion of control and predictability. If we avoid the number 13, maybe we can avoid bad luck too. Additionally, there's a social aspect to consider. fear and superstitions can be contagious. When people around us harbor certain fears or beliefs, we're more likely to adopt them ourselves. This phenomenon, known as social learning, might play a part in the widespread fear of the number 13. So is there something inherently scary about the number 13? The science suggests not. Rather, our fear of the number 13 seems to be a product of psychological processes like confirmation bias, superstitions, and social learning. It seems our brains are wired to remember the bad luck associated with the number 13. But is the number 13 always unlucky? Let's flip the coin and look at the other side of the story. It may come as a surprise to some, but in certain cultures, the number 13 is not feared but celebrated. Take China, for example. The Chinese language is filled with homophones, words that sound the same but have different meanings. The word for 13, shisan, sounds very similar to the words for definitely vibrant or assured growth. This linguistic coincidence has given the number 13 a positive spin, transforming it into a symbol of life, prosperity, and progress. In the same vein, in the ancient Egyptian civilization, the number 13 was considered lucky. The Egyptians believed in a spiritual journey of 13 steps that led to eternal life. The first 12 steps represented the stages of life on earth, while the 13th was the joyous leap into the realm of the eternal. Now, let's journey to the Italian peninsula. In Italy, the number 13 is associated with the great goddess, revered in witchcraft and pagan traditions. This association comes from the lunar calendar, where there are 13 full moons each year. The number 13, therefore, is symbolic of the divine feminine and the natural rhythms of life and death. In the Jewish tradition, 13 is a significant number too. A boy becomes a bar mitzvah at the age of 13, marking his transition into adulthood. The number 13 is also associated with God's attributes of mercy and compassion. It's fascinating, isn't it? How a number can inspire such diverse reactions across different cultures. The number 13, feared by many, is a beacon of hope, growth, and prosperity for others. So the next time you come across the number 13, remember, it's not just a number that fills horror movie screens or is absent from high-rise buildings. It's a number that, in many corners of the world, is welcomed with open arms and smiling faces. For some, the number 13 is not a symbol of fear, but a sign of good fortune. It all depends on perspective, doesn't it? So is the number 13 unlucky, or is it just misunderstood? A question that has intrigued minds across the globe for centuries. Let's do a quick recap. We've traced the fear of the number 13 back through history, seen its presence in mythology and religion, and noted its influence in modern culture. We've also explored the science behind this fear, and even found instances where 13 is considered lucky. The roots of this superstition seem deeply entrenched in human history. From the Last Supper to Norse mythology, the number 13 often took center stage in stories of betrayal and disaster. This historical backdrop has ingrained the notion of 13 as a harbinger of bad luck in our collective consciousness. In mythology and religion, 13 has been tied to divine wrath and chaos. This only served to further solidify its ominous reputation. Yet, it's also fascinating to note that in some cultures and religions, 13 is viewed as divine and auspicious. In modern times, the number 13 continues to evoke a sense of unease. It's often bypassed in hotel rooms, skipped in building floors, and avoided in airline seatings. This widespread avoidance only serves to perpetuate the fear. But let's not forget the science behind this fear, known as triskaidekaphobia. It's not so much about the number itself, but how our brains are wired to recognize patterns and assign meanings. The number 13 is just a victim of this neurological quirk. Interestingly, there are cultures and individuals who regard 13 as lucky. In Italy, 13 is considered a very lucky number, and in certain pagan traditions, 13 is revered. These instances challenge the universal notion of 13 as unlucky. So, is 13 really unlucky or just misunderstood? It seems the answer isn't black and white. The number 13 isn't inherently unlucky. Its reputation is largely a product of cultural and historical associations. Perhaps the number 13 is not as unlucky as we've been led to believe. Maybe it's just misunderstood.